Just a few months ago, we came so close to pulling the U.S. out of involvement in Saudi Arabia's war on Yemen, and unfortunately, the Republican-controlled House was able to stop that. A lot has changed since then, and so I'm very happy to welcome to the show one of the representatives who are leading the charge to finally finish that path. That is Representative Khanna. Welcome back to the show.
John, thanks for having me on. It's always one of my favorite shows to do.
Thank you so much. I feel the same way about you being on, not about me doing it, although I do like that too. We're once again talking about Yemen, really hoping that we can finish this thing. You're going to be putting forward your bill once again. What does that bill aim to do?
Well, the bill is very simple. It says that the United States was never authorized by Congress to be involved in aiding the Saudi coalition in the horrific bombing in Yemen. We need to stop any support for the Saudi coalition bombing. That means no refueling of their planes, no sharing intelligence, no assisting with logistics. There are 14 million Yemenis that face the possibility of famine. This is because the Saudi coalition has been bombing the ports and not letting food and medicine in. When this resolution passes the House and when it passes the Senate, it will be a huge signal to the Saudis that they need to come to the peace table, stop the bombing, and let humanitarian aid in.
And it certainly seems like that should be the outcome. It's previously passed the Senate. And unless strategically some Republicans were voting in favor of it knowing that the House would shoot it down, it seems like now it'll pass the House, it'll pass the Senate, it'll go to Donald Trump. What do you think the chances are that Donald Trump will acknowledge, I guess the political wins and go along with that? Or might he fight it and stick with his allies in Saudi Arabia?
Well, John, there are two possible outcomes. One, you believe it or not, Lindsey Graham was quoted in Politico saying he may actually consider voting for the resolution. Now, if you have people like Lindsey Graham come in and support the resolution, that's going to create a broad coalition and put a lot of pressure on the president to possibly sign it. I know it's an uphill fight, but the president's calling for withdrawal in Afghanistan. He's calling for withdrawal in Syria. It would be hypocritical for him to then say, yeah, but we need to have our involvement in Yemen. Second, even if the president doesn't sign it, it's still going to have an extraordinary impact. In the history of this country, since 1973, when the War Powers Resolution was passed, in our entire history, there has never been a War Powers Resolution that has passed both the House and the Senate. Kucinich and McGovern, many of them, they used to introduce these used to get 5, 10 votes. This is a testament to people, your viewership, the Young Turks, to folks around this country mobilizing, saying put an end to endless wars. So this is a huge statement, and we know that it's going to have an impact on the Saudis coming to the peace table. We know last year when the Senate passed it, Mattis called up the coalition and said, you're embarrassing us, come to the peace table, and that led in part to the temporary ceasefire. So I think a statement where both House and Senate pass it would have an extraordinary effect on the peace negotiations themselves.
And I have to say that as a former poli-sci student, actually having the War Powers Act being talked about at all at the national level is certainly novel. And I'm curious, now that you have, as you point out, on Yemen, you have so many willing to finally assert their constitutionally delegated role in this process, do you think that if in the future, if in the next 2 years, Donald Trump, who has at various points made very threatening remarks about North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, if he does look like he wants to initiate some sort of military action against these states, do you think that some of your allies on this issue with Yemen might be emboldened to stand up to him in those cases as well?
Well, that's exactly the point, John. This is a shot across the bow from Congress to the executive branch saying, think twice before you get us into another military excursion overseas, whether it's Iran or Venezuela or North Korea. The Congress is not going to stay silent. The Supreme Court has said that they defer to the executive branch because Congress stays silent. But if Congress asserts our role, that's going to make the executive branch a lot more wary about just getting into war. So I do think there is an emerging left-right coalition that is wary of military interventionism, that looks at Iraq, that looks at Libya, that looks at Syria, and says that the military interventionism has often made bad situations worse and has not made us safer, and that we need to be far more judicious before using military force overseas, especially when there is not a direct threat to our national security.
And it's possible that, timing-wise, as you're initiating this conversation, things are being rethought that have just been sort of accepted for some time in DC. You have the beginnings of the 2020 Democratic primary, and I wonder, do you believe that this sort of re-questioning of some of the orthodoxy on foreign policy in the Democratic Party, will that be a sort of vocal part of this primary process, do you think?
I do. I mean, I think this is going to be a huge win, of course, for Senator Sanders to say that he helped literally stop a war in Yemen because of his efforts in partnership with some of us in the House. I also think Elizabeth Warren is working towards helping reorient foreign policy. She has said that she supports troop withdrawal from Afghanistan and Syria. So I think that the fault lines on foreign policy is going to be a huge issue in the primary. People say, oh, foreign policy, people don't vote on foreign policy. That's not true. They may not care about intricacies of diplomacy, but they care about matters of war and peace. They want to end the endless wars. They want to invest in projects back home. And that's a message I think you'll hear from Democratic candidates on the field.
I hope so. And I was also hoping to get your thoughts on the launch within just the last week of the initial proposal around the Green New Deal. There's been a lot of enthusiasm from environmental progressives on that. The right appears to have collectively lost their mind and are fighting against some fictional fantasy version of the proposal that doesn't exist. What do you think about the conversation that's been generated by the launch of the Green New Deal over the past week?
Well, it's long overdue. It's urgent. But here's what I tell my Republican friends. I said, okay, let's agree to disagree on scientific facts on climate change. Do you want us to lose our environmental job creation leadership to China? Because China is doing this. They're creating the solar jobs. They're creating the wind jobs. They're creating energy efficiency jobs. Would you rather those jobs and industry be in China, or would you rather we lead there? This is a policy that is pro-economic growth. It's going to put people at GM and other people at factories back to work as you have SUV electric vehicles. It's going to create jobs in solar and wind. So this is good for the economy and it's future oriented. The Republicans are opposing something that's actually in our national interest.
I just have to say that gives me hope, because when I hear from the right, they're saying Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants to ban cows. That sort of response coming from you right there, I think, is going to be pretty convincing to the American people, and hopefully you'll be given the right venues to make that argument.
Well, I just think it's ridiculous. I mean, they're appealing to fair, and they're throwing these things out. I think what we've got to say is we're forward-looking, and we care about the American interest and competitiveness. I can make this argument from Silicon Valley. We lost the semiconductor industry to Taiwan because we weren't ahead of the curve in realizing the technology. On the other hand, we didn't lose some of the software companies. Apple and Google and others are still here. Well, we want to make sure that the clean tech economy, which is going to be a huge part of the world economy, is in the United States. I don't see how any American would be opposed to that. And that's really what the Green New Deal is about.
Representative Khanna, as always, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your input.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much for watching this clip from the Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.